I can see a new Jean Coltart. The Alison's there. Who else have we got now? Margaret. Okay. Caroline, Jean, Alison. There you go. Welcome, everybody. So if you just bear with us for a few minutes, we're a wee bit early. Alan set this up early for Jacqueline. This is new technology to Jacqueline.
I know, bear with me a second. I'm just trying to find how we make sure this goes live on Facebook. It seemed to start quicker than I thought.
That your telly on in the background, Chris?
No. It's my
funny angle to have your telly.
Everything looks in a strange angle here, but it's not. It's just the way
it's just the way it's situated
and such like. But no. I don't really pay much attention to it.
Callie saying good afternoon, everyone, on this beautiful. I think you mean beautiful day. It's a nice day actually. Took dog out. Spring day. It is indeed. It's lovely. I saw something this morning. It's going to turn colder again, but I'm not paying any attention to that. Spring, the blossoms out on the trees. It's lovely. I like blossom. And someone else is typing in. So are we just going to go live, Jacqueline, with Facebook, and I'll just chat to people and wait on Dave coming in?
Well, thankfully the go live button has now appeared on Facebook, so
I will.
Are we live?
Background.
I will now put us live on Facebook. Bear with me.
Okay. Oh, thank you, Jean.
We are now live and it is recording. The 2 bits on, we need to double check.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. We're just waiting on Professor Jones joining us. Caroline's asking, are you unwell, Collette? Yes, I've got COVID. My husband brought it into the house and he's been extremely unwell. And I'm doing not too bad. Thank you. I think David is here, but he's not quite. He's coming in at some point. And this is Jacqueline. For those of you who don't know Jacqueline, Jacqueline is young man. How are you?
Hello.
Sorry, where's the young man? I'm the young man.
This is Jacqueline, David, our grants officer. Alan's on holiday.
Hello.
So
hi.
Sorry, it's roasting in here.
Right, and we've got Chris in the background. We've got Linda who's going to be firing things down to me. Are you well, David?
I am frantically busy.
Aye.
Right. Good to see you, David.
Always. David, could you and I do a catch up next week? We need just a bit clarity around things. Crystal ball. I've got COVID, so bear with me. You passed it to me down the airwaves. I'm sure you did. I've been all right. My husband's been quite ill. I've been all right. Right, we're going to get started, everybody. Thank you for being here, David. We'll get on with this as quick as possible.
I thought Scotland had the best COVID outcome in the world by locking people down.
It could well be that I will be coming to live in your neck of the woods, and you'll have to put up with me on a regular basis. So watch your cheek, young man. Anyway, don't believe everything you hear from the Tartan Army. Jacqueline, you happy to blank down?
Yeah, I will disappear. I'm glad it's all set up. I'll speak to you later. Have a great session.
Thank you for your kind wishes, everybody. I'm not too ill with COVID, but I just wish the wee line would go away on the I got offered the antivirals, David. But it means coming off your blood pressure tablets, and I wasn't ill anyway, so it's fine. Right. Okay. You ready?
Yeah.
Is it true that you don't have the itch? That if you don't have the itch, our PBC is low risk and less aggressive? Brilliant question.
No.
There you go.
No.
Right.
So just to unpack it a little bit, is that there is genuinely no link at all between the severity of symptoms across a population. Between the severity of symptoms and the disease. And within an individual person, some people will get itch, some people won't get itch. But if you do get itch and you didn't have it before, it doesn't mean the disease has changed. It doesn't mean it's got worse. So genuinely, there is probably something in people who get itch as well as PBC that puts them at risk. And that might be it might be a genetic factor. So all of the transporters that transport things into the bile are all genetically controlled, and so variation in that might explain it. Have we ever talked about chili? Have we ever talked about chili? I don't think we have. Not the food, the country. There's a condition called cholestasis of pregnancy. There'll be many people on this who are familiar with that, and it's very common. It's one of the commonest sorts of liver disease in pregnancy, and most people they get a little bit of itching, and perhaps their enzymes go off a little bit towards the end of pregnancy, and that is about a transporter abnormality. So it's a variation of normal. So people just have a transporter that doesn't work terribly well for bile acids. And it's also controlled by female hormones. And so when you get pregnant, towards the end of pregnancy, the placenta is pouring out estrogen and progesterone. And that means that these transporters can't quite work. You're also coping with the baby, and it just overloads the system a little bit. And people, end up not being able to transport bile acids out, and they get itch. So it's just the same itch as PBC itch. And the country in the world that had the commonest or that had the highest rate of this was Chile. And something extraordinary, like 1 in 100 pregnancies in Chile had cholestasis of pregnancy. And it was always thought to be something in the genes of people who lived in Chile, because there's a sort of strange combination of Spain and South American native. It was always thought to be that. And in the last 10 years, it's gone from 1 in 100 pregnancies to 1 in 1,000 pregnancies. Okay. Now, that can't possibly be genetic. So there's obviously something in the environment that just makes all of this happen. So to get that degree of change very quickly, it can only be something, pollution or something in the environment or whatever, that just contributes to all of this. So to get PBC itch, you almost certainly need to have PBC, obviously. You then probably need to have the sorts of genes that kind of predispose to poor bile flow a little bit. And that's why people with PBC have often had a history of cholestasis in pregnancy, because it's the same genes. And then probably something you eat, drink, breathe in is in the environment that makes it worse. But none of that is to do with the severity of the disease.
So an interesting one. Maybe we'll hear more about that sometime, David. That was fascinating. Next question is, do you have any information on bezafibrate and the benefits of taking it? And I'm assuming this person is taking it as a second line medication for PBC.
Bezafibrate. Okay. So this has been the new big thing that's been around for absolutely the longest. And I like to point out to people, everyone's discovering bezafibrate as a new and exciting treatment. We first used it 15 years ago. There's nothing new under the sun. We first used it 15 years ago. We published our experience about 10 years ago, and we've probably used it in more people than in any other clinic in the world, including we've used it in more people than the trials of bezafibrate have used it in. So it's kind of an overnight success that's been 20 years in the making. So what is bezafibrate, for those who aren't familiar? Well, it's an old-fashioned cholesterol-lowering treatment. So everyone's forgotten about it because of statins. So statins have obviously come along and very widely used. And statins do two things. One is that they reduce your cholesterol. And if you've got a high bad cholesterol, that puts you at risk of heart disease. But statins almost certainly also protect your arteries. So it isn't all about lowered cholesterol. There's something else that statins do to reduce heart attack, stroke risk. Bezafibrate is as effective as statin for lowering cholesterol, but it doesn't protect your arteries. And for that reason, it's gone almost completely out of fashion. So people stopped using it for cholesterol lowering. Now, what's cholesterol got to do with PBC? Well, two things. One is many people on the call will have a high cholesterol value. That's very common in PBC. It's a source of much concern, although it's important to know that for most people, it's the good cholesterol that's high, not the bad cholesterol.
Yeah.
So a total cholesterol number is meaningless in PBC. You need to split it into high and low risk ones. So heart disease actually is less common in PBC than in people in the general population. Although remember, there are still people with PBC who get heart disease like there are with other diseases. It doesn't protect you completely, but it's not a particular problem in PBC. Although I'm going to say this very, very quietly because we don't talk of such things. PBC patients are more likely to smoke. Okay. So we don't talk about that because it's a bad thing. They're legally required to say it's a bad thing. So PBC patients smoke. So
or used to, or had X.
Or used to. Okay. So and remember, of all of the things that put you at risk of heart disease, smoking is the most important. So any heart disease risk in PBC actually is mainly related to smoking. I don't think, by the way, smoking causes PBC. I think it's a consequence of the life changes that you get with PBC, but that's by the by. So cholesterol is elevated in PBC. So there's something funny about cholesterol in PBC. The other thing, of course, is the bile acids. So the bile acids go out in the bile. They're there to help you dissolve fat. They also irritate the bile ducts. That's what causes PBC. They are made out of cholesterol. So there's something funny about cholesterol in PBC. It's kind of there or thereabouts in a few ways. So bezafibrate was used in lots of people with PBC because they had a high cholesterol to reduce their heart disease risk, and it reduced their cholesterol, but people noticed it made your liver blood tests a bit better as well. So that's the history of it being used. And then the Japanese in particular used it a lot to study its effects in PBC. But there were no really good trials until a couple of years ago when the French did a trial called the BES-URSO trial, which is bezafibrate and urso versus urso.
I remember that,
yeah. And showed a important improvement in liver biochemistry with bezafibrate, okay, that wasn't there in placebo. And it was a trial a bit like the obeticholic acid trial. So this was a real step forward. This is the first. These were really well done trials in PBC, which was a big step up. So bezafibrate improves your liver biochemistry, your alk-phos number and your bilirubin number. Okay. There is also a more recent study called the Fitch trial. The Fitch trial, which is fibrate for itch. And this looked at the ability of bezafibrate to improve PBC itch, and that was a pretty small trial, about 25 PBC patients, about 25 PSC, and it was only for 3 weeks, but it did show that there was a significant improvement in itch. We weren't involved in that trial for a variety of reasons, but Ulrich Boyers, who did it, who's an old friend of mine in Amsterdam. I did make a sole contribution to that trial. So all trials now have a funky name. So that's the Fitch trial. They originally, when they were doing this trial, they were going to call it the bezafibrate itch trial, which was going to be the Fitch trial. And I pointed out to them that probably didn't work. And so they should change the name. So that's my contribution. The Fitch trial used to be the Bitch trial. So that's also nice and that's helpful. So bezafibrate improves your liver biochemistry and it also reduces itch. And you can sense there's a but coming, and this is the but. The but is it's tended to be used in people with milder PBC than obeticholic acid has. So if you look at both the trials and the UK, real world experience that Palak, who you all know from these sessions, has collected all the information from UK PBC from people getting bezafibrate and obeticholic acid. So it was used in people with a milder disease. So it's kind of not like with like. The second thing is that just watch out, it does artificially change alkaline phosphatase. So it actually drops the number without having an effect on bile duct cells. So that the effect may be look a little larger than it really is. So it's probably not quite as effective as obeticholic acid. But the really important one is that it can cause kidney problems and liver problems over time. And so it does need to be watched over a length of time. So obeticholic acid, if you're going to get the problems with it, which are the itch, you get it early on, pretty quickly. But with bezafibrate, you kind of get problems a little bit over time. So you need to watch it. So the thing I always say is, if you need second-line therapy, the approved licensed second-line therapy is obeticholic acid. That means it's been through effectiveness testing, it's been through safety testing, and that's been evaluated around the world by the regulatory bodies who approve drugs. And that's the first properly licensed treatment for PBC ever. In fact, it's properly licensed in a way that urso wasn't. So that was a really important step forward. Bezafibrate, there is less information, it's been less evaluated, and we are less clear about its pros and cons. And the thing I always say is, if you need second-line therapy, why not obeticholic acid? Now, there are good reasons why we would use bezafibrate, not obeticholic acid. Usually itch would be a good reason, but there has to be a good reason. And just because it's cheaper to you as an individual is not a good reason, okay? I actually push back at that, because that rather implies we use very expensive cancer treatments, we use very expensive hepatitis C treatments. Are we really saying that PBC patients don't warrant a better treatment? I think that's underselling you. Now, there are perfectly good reasons to use bezafibrate. We use it ourselves. We're about 50-50 in our clinic, but there has to be a reason, and that reason can't be cheap, because frankly, you're all worth more than that.
Oh, thank you. You're a nice man. You can come back again.
The cost argument, you know, this is all about lives and quality of life and length of life and families, and you know, I get all of that, but you know, I get cost, but you know, at the end of the day, it's, you know.
Do you know, I've asked a couple of consultants who've spoken to me and said that they've oppressed because of costing, and I've said to them, I've asked them, what would you do if it was your wife that had PBC? So I'll leave you to ponder that. And just while we're talking costing, we've got a lot of people online here today and a lot of people in the room, David, and I'm going to say to everybody, I'm going to mention at the end, we all know things are tough financially out there. The foundation, we're not receiving any donations. We're receiving nothing. We've now been doing this service. This is 2 years this week, David. I'm very, very proud of what everybody's contributed to. I'm sure Dave's going to endorse what I'm saying. But please, if you want our service to continue, can you drop us a few bob? Go on our website, donate. We've got nothing's coming in at all. And what we've got are a few standing orders from people who've been with us a long time. So please, would you donate to the foundation? We just want to survive. We don't get any government money. So that's my little plug there. You would endorse that, wouldn't you, David? You know, yes, we're nearly there, aren't we?
Yes, and I think you know, all of the clinicians and all the clinicians and the sort of scientists and people like this, I would say we do it out of the goodness of our heart, but I actually do it mainly to avoid being told off by Collette. Which is, you know, and honestly, she, you know, she's one of these people where you stand up automatically when she talks to you. So, so all of that.
I'm going to speak to your wife about you.
Yeah. So, just an interesting aside. Okay. So you'll hear lots of times that doctors swear the Hippocratic Oath. Okay. And actually we don't, although it's starting to come in as a sort of thing for medical students, okay? So the Hippocratic Oath about our duty to look after people. We do, however, have an ethical obligation to our patients, okay? And we have an ethical obligation to do the right thing for a patient. And that right thing could involve a treatment, but it also could involve not treating people. And that's, you know, the difficult part of what we do. But we have to do, in consultation with that patient and their family, the right thing for that patient, okay? So I have an ethical obligation to all of my patients. If my registrar sees that patient and does something wrong, that's me, because I am ethically, you know, obliged. I have no ethical obligation to a patient I don't manage, who I don't know, who might get a treatment because I save some money by not treating a PBC patient. My ethical obligation is not to the health service, not to future patients, not to other patients. It is to my patient that I am responsible for. And so people who say I'm saving the health service by prescribing cheap drugs, fine. But if you are in breach of your ethical obligation to your patient in order to save what is a large state bureaucracy.
Endless bucket, yeah.
All a bit messed up. That's not to say we don't use bezafibrate. We do, but you have to do it for a reason, and that reason has to apply to the person sitting in front of you.
Yeah, brilliant. Very well put. Right, I take rifampicin. So should I avoid alcohol? It says nothing on the packet. Funny, I was speaking to a pharmacist at the Western Journal in Edinburgh, a professional call the other day. And I think pharmacists are really underused by the population. They know so much more. Very, very clever people. If it says nothing on the packet, it's not telling you anything. But do ask the pharmacist. Have you got a comment, David, about rifampicin and alcohol, or would you rather?
Yeah, I've got two comments. So the first one is I would echo everything that Collette said about pharmacists. Okay, and it has been pointed out, and it for those of you who don't know, I spent a few years, doing stuff with the Department of Health. And I think in the Department of Health, they realized this, that it's a great untapped resource. And of course, pharmacists were open throughout COVID. And it was one of the bits of the health service that was open and functioning normally, as the hospitals, largely were. And that's important because we miss out. What pharmacists know par excellence is about interactions of drugs. That's what they know. That's what they do. So what are the side effects of drug A? What are the side effects of drug B? And most of all, what are the side effects of the combination of drug A and drug B? So they really are. Now, remember, when you go to a pharmacy, there will be people working behind the counter and there will be a pharmacist. A pharmacy can't be open without a pharmacist there, okay? But it won't necessarily be the person behind the counter. It'll be the person behind the scenes. And if you notice, all pharmacies will have a consultation room, okay? So they'll have a room where you can go and have a chat with a pharmacist. And so if you want to have a chat, you just literally go and say, I'm taking, a slightly unusual medicine. Rifampicin for itch is a slightly unusual medicine. Could I have a chat with a pharmacist? And they will then take you into a private consultation room and have a chat with you. It won't be the person behind the counter, but they will be very happy to do it. And they will be much, much happy to do that than for there to be problems down the line. So they're really good. They're underutilized. They know far more about drugs than most doctors do, and so use them, particularly if it's something a little bit out of the ordinary. Now, rifampicin, what rifampicin does is it's what called induces enzymes, okay? So you'll have heard of that term, induce their enzymes. So basically, what it does is it triggers the liver to be more effective at metabolizing things, okay? So alcohol actually is an enzyme inducer as well. And that's why people who drink a lot, not relevant to anyone on this call, but people who drink a lot seem to be tolerant of alcohol. They seem to be able to drink a lot without it ever touching them. And that's because they stimulate their liver to be more effective at metabolizing alcohol, okay? Now, there are certain drugs that will work more or less effectively in a liver where the function has been increased in that way. And the classic example would be warfarin, okay? So if you take warfarin and rifampicin, so if you're on warfarin and you take rifampicin, you will find that your INR varies and goes off, okay? And the same thing happens with alcohol. That's why people taking warfarin are advised just to be cautious with alcohol. Now, rifampicin and rifampicin and alcohol don't interact, but they both induce the enzyme. So the two would work together to have that effect. Now, it doesn't actually matter with warfarin, and there will be people on the call on warfarin. There will be people on warfarin, and people worry about alcohol, worry about things like rifampicin. The most important thing, though, is not to change. So remember, they adjust your dose of warfarin according to how effective it is. And so if you take rifampicin, you adjust to the level when you're on rifampicin. And, to be honest, if you like a drink once a week, then your body adjusts to that. So actually, it's not upping and downing. It's keeping it reasonably constant. That's the most important thing. So just watch out for that. Drugs can interact with other drugs. And that's the sort of thing pharmacists are very good at.
Okay. Yeah, I'd 100%.
And that's the closest thing to a doctor ever saying carry on drinking. That's the closest thing that we'll ever say. But if you are the worst, if you do like a drink, then a lot of drink, then not drinking at all, then a lot of drink is the worst thing to do. So if you like the odd glass of wine, stick with it, but actually it's best not to up and down it.
Yeah. Somebody's asked, it's safe to go on slim fast with PBC. Well, that's
yes.
Other than go on slim fast, I mean, I don't know if you can say it's safe or not, but I would go and buy pinch of nom cookbooks, 400 calorie meals, dead easy, and you can stock up, stick them in the freezer. But you can comment on the slim fast. I'm not a fan of these things.
I've lost 1.5 stone in weight.
Wow, brilliant! But you've done that with low carb, though, haven't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
My wife, who is she's 5 foot tall, and she is per inch of height the world's scariest person. She's got us all eating low carb.
Well, I've lost 3 stone 9 pounds, but I'm on 1,800 calories a day, and I try and work out. I'm not at the moment because I've got COVID. I'm not very well, but slim fast, I don't see that would affect the PBC.
No,
it's not recommended.
No. The one thing nutritionally to watch out, there are 2 things to watch out for. One is you can get a bit short of some vitamins. Yeah. So particularly the fat soluble vitamins A, D, E, K. So a good ordinary multivitamin. Don't buy the expensive stuff. Just supermarkets in the UK sell really good, cheap, effective vitamins. And then the other one is fat intolerance. So obviously there's in any diet, there's protein, there is fat, and there is carbohydrate, and it's getting a balance between all of those. But a lot of these, things like the Atkins diet, which is very high protein and fat, then sometimes people can struggle with that because of the fat load, because of the absorption, because of the PBC. But if you are tolerating it in terms of bowels and things like that, then there is no metabolic issue with it. The reason why we are, as a society, we have a problem with weight is we eat too much and we exercise too little. And actually, whichever way you slice and dice it, that's what it is. And because we are programmed to hoard food, if you like, because if you have to go and catch your own food and skin it, then you don't know where the food's going to come from. So we're in a world where we are programmed to store food, but it's too easily available, and we don't exercise enough. And then all of those things that have happened in the world, like shutting gyms and swimming pools with COVID, and locking down, and all of that have really knocked our exercise. And actually, if you're sitting around fed up at home, miserable, what do? You eat more, or you smoke, and there's a lot of collateral damage come out from a lot of collateral damage that comes out from from COVID. I used to tell people I was on the Seymour diet, which is see more Greggs sausage rolls, eat more Greggs sausage rolls.
But you know as well, David, our habits have changed. I mean, I'm a bit older than you, and my mum, lived in a part of England. She was evacuated. Her city was bombed during the war, and they were brought up in ration. But we had 3 meals a day. There was no such thing as a snack. No such thing. Whereas I know lots of friends, grandchildren, children, they have snack cupboards. Anyway, maybe just me. I'm getting old. Okay. Background, my AMA was 1.160. A diagnosis is now 1.1280.
Yeah.
I looked this up online, and it seems to indicate that a higher anti-nuclear antibody titer means more aggressive autoimmune disease. Is this the same for the anti-mitochondrial antibody? Does it, in other words, does it matter how much AMA they've got?
No.
I didn't think so, because I've got loads.
No, and to the extent that once you're diagnosed with PBC, we don't recheck it. If it goes down, it doesn't mean it's going better. If it goes up, it doesn't mean it's doing worse. And remember, the level of it is important because it determines the degree to which we are certain it's there. The higher the level, the more certain we are it's there, but nothing beyond that. And remember, the antibody doesn't cause the damage. Okay. So where people, there are plenty of people who get these antibodies and have no ill effects at all, but it is a marker of what's going on. But it doesn't cause the problem. Nor, interesting, of course, does the alkaline phosphatase. So we're very used to alkaline phosphatase values being measured and important in PBC. But alkaline phosphatase itself doesn't cause any damage. It's a sign that damage is taking place.
Yeah. Now, the next one is PBC and cirrhosis being managed well. Haven't had an alcoholic drink in a couple of years. I recently had a couple of bouts of jaundice. My recent blood test showed an increase in bilirubin and albumin, and as I understand it, a raised albumin level is a good sign. What would you suggest I do re jaundice and bilirubin? I would just like to say to this person before David answers, I hope that you're attached, you're being cared for by one of the big 7 liver units in the United Kingdom. And they are Newcastle, Edinburgh, Leeds, Birmingham. There's 2 in London. What have I missed? Cambridge, of course. And if not, I would suggest that you speak to your current GP or consultant and ask to be transferred across. David, would you like to comment?
I'm almost redundant. You know the one.
No, but you know the real hard stuff and words I can't pronounce.
Anyone would think you knew anything about PBC. I mean, there you go. Right. Can I just say, one of the plug for the foundation is that it's really difficult getting balance in how you approach guidance and advice. Okay. And all patient support groups will recognize this, because many of these conditions have a lot of people with relatively mild forms of the disease, and then you'll have a small number of people with more severe forms of the disease. So what do? Do you talk all the time about severe forms of disease and scare people who have got relatively mild disease? Or do you talk about mild disease and kind of ignore the needs of people with more severe disease? And so it's really tricky to get that balance. And I think the foundation did that spectacularly well. But it's not easy, and we're very familiar with this. And the kind of way we talk to people, is informed by where you need to pitch that conversation. Okay, so so getting the balance about what we talk about and speak and think about and advise people is really important. So most people with PBC in 2022 will not become cirrhotic. Okay, that's the good news. And the numbers will go down and down and down, but it will never disappear. And it will never disappear for 2 reasons. One is late presentation. So one of the areas where we do a lot of education work is with GPs and consultants to make sure that people don't miss it, because if you don't diagnose it, you can't treat it. So that's going to be the last lingering problem, that if it's not been diagnosed, it can't be treated. And then the other is that there will be some people, and I suspect a relatively small number, who genuinely don't respond to the therapy. So cirrhosis is something that we see less and less and less, and that's a good thing. And every single thing that we do as a research unit and as a trials unit and all of that is to stop people progressing to cirrhosis, full stop. Most people with PBC will never get jaundice either. So you go back to the early descriptions of it, talks about jaundice as a diagnostic feature. Well, we probably haven't got anybody in the clinic at the moment who's got jaundice, okay, which is raised bilirubin. So, so in a way, there are things that we used to see a long time ago, and that we see much less. Just by the by, we're organising a seminar at the EASL meeting, and there's going to be a request for patient input into that, the patient voice. And it's what we're doing is a combination of where have we come from and where are we going, and it's a little bit to look back at what's been achieved without being complacent, and then a little bit about what do we still need to do. And in a sense, over time, the questions and challenges change. But I'm going to introduce this by talking about what PBC management was like in 1992 when I started. I've been doing it 30 years this year. And in those days, most people were jaundiced. Everybody had a liver biopsy every year, and we gave people no treatment. Okay, so if anybody ever thinks we haven't made any progress, that's your answer. That's the and symptoms were not even recognised as being real. Okay,
there was no URSO either at that time.
No,
David.
no URSO, nothing. Okay, so that's the progress we've made. So that's in my working lifetime. So having said all of that, there are people who have cirrhosis, and what we need to do as you know, the clinicians working with the individuals, is be on top of this absolutely all the time, on a continual basis. And so everybody with cirrhosis needs their own management plan, individual to them and their needs, because people are different. And that's where Colette's point about who's looking after this is really important. I would like, as I said, we have nobody with jaundice in our clinic at the moment that I'm familiar with. So any liver unit would instantly say the same thing. Anybody jaundiced in their catchment area, we would like to be managing them. Or at least jointly managing them with their own local centre. I want to know about them because I want to know what's going on, because I want to be able to be ready for whatever, if anything, happens. So nobody is burdening anybody by doing that, because ultimately, if you get poorly with this, you're going to go to that unit. So that unit would like to know nice and early to manage it. There is nothing about being jaundiced with cirrhosis that should worry people, other than everyone needs to be absolutely clear what the plan is. Yeah. So it's the only danger in that situation is not being on top of that situation. Yeah. Yeah. So normally what happens is where people are cirrhotic and go a little bit jaundiced, there's normally something that's come along that has just knocked them a little bit. So we talk about the disease baseline and fluctuation around the baseline. So normally if people get a little bit under the weather, you know, for a cold or COVID, or take a different tablet, or have an operation, or, you know, trip over the dog and break their leg, or anything like that, will always make the bilirubin go up. And it's one of the kind of party tricks that people like me have, which is to be able to predict the future. Because if that happens, if you've fallen over the dog and broken your leg, then your bilirubin will go up, but you can almost completely predict when it will improve again. So you know, the party trick is to be able to tell people exactly what's going to happen over the next 3 months, and it always behaves. So it always goes back to how it was before. Yeah. Okay. The first thing where people have a raised bilirubin is not to panic, but to think through why it's happened. It's important to know. So has something made this temporarily worse? In which, so, you know, case if it's a drug or something, then you would want to take the drug away. Sometimes it's that baseline is going downwards over time, and that's where you need to be really aware of this. So if the bilirubin is 50 or something like that, that's not a reason to panic, but you need to know what that is in a month's time. Okay, yeah. It's 30, it's getting better. That's what I've said about this sort of fluctuating around the baseline. But if it's 60, if it's 70, then everyone needs to be live to that. And that's where it needs, you know, more in the way of workup to understand what's going on. So, and that's where it gets very individual, and it turns, you know, it's all about whether transplant's appropriate, whether that's something people, you know, would feel comfortable with. You're into that sort of territory. I started literally 30 years ago with Oliver James, who will be known to Collette, but be known to a few people on the call. And almost the first thing he told me in PBC, we didn't transplant in those days, but we were sending people to Birmingham, and he said, "My boy," that's what he used to say, "my boy, the only thing to know about in PBC is when the bilirubin's 50, you think about transplant, and when the bilirubin's 100, you do transplant." And you know what? He was absolutely right. Absolutely right. And that's still exactly what we teach. Think about it at 50, do it at 100. And if somebody, for whatever reason, transplant isn't appropriate, then you manage it in different ways. So the message is don't panic, but take it seriously. That there will be somebody in your unit that you'll be attached to, who will be the one who looks after people in this kind of space. It's Jess Dyson in our service, and they will want to get on top of it all. And if the treatment guidelines that are out there, they have 3 pillars to the management of PBC. Pillar 1 is to treat with urso, assess response to urso, and then start bezafibrate, obeticholic acid if you haven't had an adequate response. Pillar 3 is assess symptoms and react accordingly, okay, and treat those. But pillar 2 is to watch the severity of the disease and act. And it says, with a rising bilirubin, you need to discuss people with the local transplant unit, however that operates. Okay, so that's what we're talking about here. Just to say, we've all been doing a big audit of practice in PBC across the UK.
Oh, it's wonderful.
And what that has done is to show what we're doing well and what we're doing less well across the country. So we're diagnosing PBC well, we're starting urso well, we are asking about symptoms less well. The foundation's data all support this. But one of the things that's happening less well is people with a rising bilirubin being discussed with transplant units. Okay.
Yeah.
And please don't harm yourself by not wanting to bother the doctor. Please don't do that. So what you need to do is to go along and say, and please, by all means, say that you heard this on one of these things, that the doctor says anybody with a rising bilirubin needs to be referred to a liver unit. To help people, a little bit like the same theme as the app, we produce these cards with UK PBC to help people understand their blood test. So it allows you to plot your alkaline phosphatase and plot your bilirubin, and it's color coded, right? So, and the reason for this is that if you fall into the amber zone, so the green zone says you're fine, the amber zone says people need to have a little think about this, and the red zone means you need to do something now, okay? And what gets you in the red zone is a raised bilirubin, okay? So, and it's to help have those discussions. So with a raised bilirubin, the question is, what are you going to do next with it? And that next needs to involve people who understand the nuances of PBC.
Absolutely, yeah. I think maybe we should write about this in the newsletter. I'll ask James, given that he's nearly retired now. And I'll refer them to the PBC UK audit, and perhaps we could.
And where problems arise with all of this, where problems arise around, people with bad PBC, there's always been an opportunity to do it better that people haven't taken. So just remember that, and you want somebody to have a good look at this in order to work out what's going on, because there is no one size fits all for this, because everyone's different in this space. Okay, so please don't worry about it, but
make sure
you be taken seriously.
You raise a very good point there about the last 30 years, 1992, because I was diagnosed in 94, and Intercept would help them promote a questionnaire, and one of the questions was, how long after you were diagnosed with PBC did you receive URSO? 3 months, 6 months, whatever. I said, no, hang on a minute. For many of us, there was no URSO. That's come later. But anyway, good point raised. Do people's PBC describe the itch as itching or burning? Mine seems to be burning sensation, especially my head and legs.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, really, really good observation, and absolutely. So the itch in PBC is not classical allergy type of irritated skin itch, okay? The sort of, hives or something like that itch. It's very different to that. And it's because it's an irritation of nerves under the surface of the skin. And those nerves are very closely related to the ones that transmit pain, okay? And so actually this can be a painful itch. A lot of people talk about that.
Yeah.
It's like electric pricks. Also, these fibers are the same ones that detect fine touch, okay? An insect on your skin. So if you kind of, touch the desk or something like that, then that's quite a significant stimulus. And that gives you a certain signal to your brain. But if you have an insect walk over you, you will notice that as a very different sensation. and that's related as well. So people with PBC itch can talk about itch, they can talk about creepy crawlies under the skin, they can talk about a painful itch, and they are all PBC itch. And one of the traps people fall into is to miss the fact that's itch, because people don't use the word itch. And actually, one of the treatments we use, not commonly, but we use occasionally in people with difficult to treat itch, is a drug called gabapentin. And many people will be familiar with gabapentin as a pain controlling drug. It reduces nerve transmission for neuralgia. And so it's exactly that point. In fact, why are you treating a nerve blocking pain treatment? Well, because it's a painful nerve stimulus. And in terms of head and legs, those are the two characteristic places you get PBC itch, over the scalp and particularly the soles of the feet.
Yeah, I think it's my hair dye, but never mind.
I don't dye my hair.
Oh, is that right now, David? Full of information today.
It would be I'm also at that point, I get increasingly less good value for money for my haircut.
Can having COVID make PBC worse? I'm sitting here with COVID now and I'm working, but I'm very lucky.
Oh gosh. The data, the information we have, and I have to say my experience would suggest that we're not seeing a particular problem with bad COVID in PBC. So I don't think PBC particularly makes COVID worse. Where people have had problems in liver disease, it's if they're taking immunosuppression, which most people with PBC aren't, so not urso or OCA or bezafibrate, they're fine. So people take immunosuppression, so largely the autoimmune hepatitis patients, some overlap patients in PBC, and people after transplant. You have to be very careful about COVID in that. And then the other group are the people with cirrhosis. So you have less reserve. And remember, your liver is actually quite an important immune organ. So if you're cirrhotic, then your immunity doesn't work quite as well. So those are the two groups. Now, the other way around, of course, very interesting, which is what the question was, is does COVID make PBC worse? And actually, it's possible it can do, because it stimulates the immune system to produce lots of immune chemicals. So remember I said that people with cirrhosis, almost anything can make them worse. Well, to an extent, anything which ratchets the immune system up will kind of turn things on. The interesting question, which we're getting increasingly fascinated by, is long COVID and PBC fatigue and brain fog, because where we see people with nothing to do with PBC with long COVID, their symptoms are all but identical to the brain fog type of problems that PBC patients get, which I think is very interesting. And the question then is, there a sort of similar type of mechanism, and therefore potentially could COVID with a long COVID element make PBC fatigue worse? I think it's too early to know.
Yeah.
If you like, our experience of COVID and PBC is that COVID has impacted on PBC mainly because it's got in the way of really effective management. And one of the worries I've got is that in an organization like ours, where we run dedicated PBC clinics, we never stopped managing PBC patients to the best of our ability. Jess Dyson, my colleague, who many people will know, she absolutely told the hospital in no uncertain terms that what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it. And we carried on all the way through. We saw patients all the way through. We pragmatically, where people didn't need to come to the clinic, we spoke to them on the phone, but we still never stopped seeing people where we needed to see them. However, I'm very aware that in a lot of centres that didn't happen. So one of the things we're really uncomfortable with is the idea that there's a postcode lottery, that if you happen to go to one of the centres that really manage PBC with good people that whose names you know, and who are the people who crop up in these sessions, then they really put their heart and soul into doing it well. but 10 miles down the road can be a centre where they don't. And that's really unfair. And unfortunately, that gap has always been there, but it's kind of got a little bit wider with COVID, I fear. And one of the things that we're desperately trying to do is to support people to make sure that you as an individual get everything you need.
Yeah. Okay. Now we've got a question here, and we've got stacks of questions. This one in particular, I think, is going to be a very long. This is something I think we should write about. We were told by James it's your area of expertise, and I don't think it's for today. It says, is there any information you can give about autonomic dysfunction symptoms and how we can best understand this? I'm not quite sure I actually know what this is, not being a doctor, but I don't think this is for today. Is this something we could perhaps write about, David?
Yes, I think it will be a very good topic to write about. And you're right, it's something that we've done a lot of talking about and thinking about.
Right. So I will say to the person,
2 minutes, just 2 minutes on it, perhaps. Basically, it's all about blood pressure regulation. Okay. So if you're lying down and you suddenly stand up, the blood will automatically start to pool in your legs. And if you don't control that, you will black out. And that is going to, if you don't black out, I mean, the old thing about don't stand somebody up who's fainted because they can get brain damage from it. It's absolutely right. So ultimately, if your brain is not getting blood, it goes into an emergency mode to protect it by blacking out. But before it does that, your body tries to make sure the blood pressure in your brain is maintained. So when you stand up, there's actually a really complicated process that kicks in to keep your blood pressure up rather than it all pooling in your legs. Okay. And blood vessels in the artery in the neck sense the blood pressure. When it starts to drop, they trigger your brain to trigger a signal, which triggers your veins in your leg to squeeze and push blood back towards the heart. And it's just the same as a G suit that a fighter pilot would wear which inflates around the leg to return blood so they don't black out. Okay. To cut a long story short, in PBC, that just doesn't work. And so therefore you have this tendency to have abnormal blood pressure regulation. And that means that you can end up with dizziness, with falls. It also means that you don't perfuse your muscles properly and you don't control muscle function properly. So it's very heavily implicated in fatigue. So why this happens in PBC, why that causes symptoms and what we do about it, I think will make an excellent topic, but it is a very important thing. And it's almost universal in PBC patients with fatigue. And another condition in which it's almost universal is long COVID. Okay.
Okay.
So let's write about that, but it's a fascinating topic.
No, we will. It's funny, that's when I knew I was pregnant. I'd faint. Anyway, now somebody's asking about bezafibrate, which we have covered, and because you've said it can cause problems with the kidney, which has happened to this person. So also, can you just stop it, or do you need to gradually come off? I've developed chronic kidney disease over the last year, but my GP only informed me a couple of days ago. This person needs to be speaking with their consultant.
Sorry, I missed the very beginning of it. Sorry, just
so does he know if anyone with bezafibrate can cause kidney problem, which we discussed? Yes.
Yes.
This person also, if you can stop, you need to gradually come off it. I've developed chronic kidney disease over the last year. My GP only informed me a couple of days ago, which is outrageous. So this person really needs to be speaking to the person who's looking after them with their PBC, don't they?
Yes. So this is what we alluded to. This is the thing that we're concerned about, is that if you give bezafibrate for a long time, then this can build up over time. But when you've been on a tablet 5 or 10 years, people drop their guard a little bit and aren't watching it. Okay. So you need to stop the bezafibrate. I think anybody with any kidney issues at all, in 2022, there is no reason to use bezafibrate anybody with kidney problems at all. Okay. Because there are alternative therapies for cholesterol alternative therapies to control the PBC. You can stop it, just stop it. There's no...
Just stop it. Right, okay, so that answers that. But to this person, yes, you can just stop it.
It will normally, the kidney impairment should improve, okay? But like all of these things, I wouldn't want to continue it for too long to find out how much it improves.
Okay. Now, somebody's put this question. I don't know if we can answer this. I was told that Aristotle stopped working for me. It says common. There's not enough information in whoever sent this question in. I don't know how long you've been on it. What does he mean by stop working? That, you know, there's not enough information to try and answer that question. But if you want to come back, it's probably not going to get done today. But you please do come back to us. Next question.
Just a general point with that. Generally speaking, all of the treatments we use in PBC, we don't have a wearing off effect. It's true, actually, all of them. So we don't see, you know, people used to antibiotics, you know, then the bug becomes resistant to it, or you've got pain and it, you know, you need to step up the pain control. That tends not to be what happens, although the disease can, of course, change. And so it's less likely to be the treatment not working, more likely to be the disease has evolved. But the net result is then the same, is it's worth thinking about other additional alternative therapies.
Yeah, and don't come off your arsehole. I get bruises, little purple dots on my arms, and now my legs are covered in bruises. Is this PBC related? And if so, is it anything serious? They need to talk to their doctor again, don't they?
Yeah, so most purple, little purple dots are things called, mostly are things called Campbell de Morgan spots, which are just one of those things that happens. Bruises, it's one of those things where a lot of people, you know, will comment on them. And the thing is, it can be everything from, you know, absolutely nothing to something, and it just needs to be thought about. So normally we all bruise a little bit more as we get older. The skin gets a little bit thinner, the vessel walls get a little bit thinner, they leak a little bit, and obviously, you know, people bang themselves more and all of that. So, you know, it's commoner to bruise as you get older. Steroids, if people are taking those, can help cause you to bruise. PBC patients can bruise a little bit more, but it's really important just to check there isn't a clotting problem, so a platelet count thing. And so it needs your bloods to be looked at. So like all of these things, 99 times out of 100, it's nothing. But if it's significant, then it doesn't cause any harm. But the question is this just one of those things, or is it, you know, being caused by some change to either the cells in the blood or the blood vessels? So just needs checking out. Okay,
back to blood pressure. Can PBC cause your blood pressure to be high? And medicine will only bring it down so far. My bottom number's in the 70s. My top number stays in the low 150 or 160s.
So what... So we've done a lot about this. Blood pressure in PBC is what I call spiky, okay? For reasons that we'll go into when we write something about it. What it does is be a bit spiky. So it can have highs that are higher than you would like and lows that you would be lower than you like. So there isn't a uniform pattern. And certainly PBC doesn't put your blood pressure up, but what it can do is temporarily lead to spikes. The average remains the same, but it's just more jaggedy, okay? So what we do see is people who end up being put on more antihypertensives because they've got their blood pressure measured at the top of a spike. And actually that means that the bottoms are even lower. And so often people end up with a blood pressure which is on average too low because people are chasing the highs rather than being aware of the lows. So it's something where it needs a little bit of thought, and actually 24-hour blood pressures are very useful in PBC to look at that, to find out, you know, as I always say to people, I'm very keen to know what your blood pressure is at 3 in the morning, because that's your natural blood pressure. The other thing, of course, is that all blood pressures are abnormal, measured in a GP surgery or in a hospital clinic. I would never measure anybody's blood pressure in the outpatient clinic because it's pointless, because by that point, they've had to try and find somewhere to park. They've had the traffic in Newcastle. they've had to, come in and they're worried about their blood test. It's a meaningless value.
Yeah.
One of the things I always say to people is that technology has moved on immensely in our lives and our world. And one of the things that is available is that when I started in medicine, if you wanted to measure blood pressure, you had to use a mercury manometer, and they were restricted in terms of their sale because mercury is poisonous, and they cost about £150 in the 1980s. Nowadays, you can go on Amazon and buy an extremely effective and accurate blood pressure machine for 20 quid. Okay. And actually, that's what I suggest people do. So these automatic cuff machines are incredibly accurate. They're what we use in the clinic now. It's what I use. I've got high blood pressure, what I use at home. And the thing is, you can just measure it regularly during the day and get a real picture and pattern for it. And we all sort of, we'd all, go onto Amazon and, other online suppliers are available. We'd all go onto Amazon and, spend 20 quid on an ABBA album, in a box set. But we don't think of spending 20 quid on a blood pressure machine, which could save your life. So what I suggest to people, it's all part of own the problem, own the solution, which is my mantra. So one of the things, if blood pressure is a problem, is to buy yourself one of those and just do lots of measurements, but write them down. Get yourself a little diary and a logbook. And I frequently ask people to do that. And they come in with different random times of the day and night, standing up, lying down, when they're worried, when they're happy, when they're watching, Strictly Come Dancing, and just a whole range of blood pressure. And that's a much truer blood pressure reflection. So just a bit like measuring activity, we can do it on our phones. It's a bit like measuring glucose. Glucose sensors are very easy now. Just get a blood pressure machine, 20 quid, and it's the best 20 quid you'll ever spend.
Okay. How are you for time?
Fine. 15:15.
Right. Hammer on. It really is going to be quick fire. Okay. I'm in Canada. In a FibroScan number changing from 13 to 28 in a year mean anything?
So FibroScan measures density of the liver. Okay, so that's what it measures, and it's an echo thing. So it's like sonar, sends out a ping, and it measures how much of the ping comes back. So if the liver is very soft and fluidy, very little of the ping comes back. But if it's solid, more of the ping comes back. Okay. So that's what it measures. In that sense, if that information is useful, that information is useful. Okay. People talk about it measuring fibrosis, scarring, cirrhosis. Okay. And it does, but that's only one potential explanation of it. It doesn't measure fibrosis at all. Biopsy measures fibrosis. It measures how much of a ping goes out and returns. And there are several caveats to it, that people need to be aware of. The first is it's operator dependent. Okay, so different people will do a FibroScan on the same person and get slightly different results. Okay, so that's the first thing to say. The second is that it slightly depends on the time of day. It slightly depends on what you've eaten and drunk. Your liver, in a sense, after a big meal, lots of nutrients go into the liver. That causes it to swell a little bit. So you will get some fluctuation around it. Okay. And then the final thing is you see inexplicable results. And anybody who looks at a lot of FibroScans like we do will tell you you'll come across inexplicable results. Okay. And we've all, seen that on lots of occasions. And we have, and I'll give you a little story about it in a second. Over 1,000 people, if you take 1,000 people and do their FibroScan, then one explanation of that move from 13 to 28 in a year is that this has developed from early-ish fibrosis through into cirrhosis. Okay, so that's an explanation for it. A one-off value of 28 is within the cirrhosis range, and over those 1,000 people, the majority of those 1,000 with a FibroScan at that level will have cirrhosis. Okay. However, the story I was going to tell you, a very nice lady who had was AMA positive with normal liver function tests, and she had FibroScans done every year. Those FibroScans were fine. We did it as a reassurance. Most people I do a FibroScan are to reassure them with a low value, and her FibroScans were fine. And she came along and saw a colleague of mine, got a FibroScan, and it was 25. Okay, completely changed from a year previously. So she had a liver biopsy to investigate that. Okay, and her liver biopsy was completely normal. Okay, and she didn't have any PBC. And then we repeated the FibroScan again, and it was normal again. We can't explain that. The person who did it can't explain that, but those were the measurements they saw on that particular day. Remember, the FibroScan, there was no hard copy, there's no record. If you do a CT scan, you can go back and look at the CT scan. If you do a biopsy, you can go back at the biopsy. But on that day, on that time, somebody who knew how to do FibroScan got a value, and that value did not reflect what was going on. We must always remember.
So go back and do it again, and that's why doctors look at trends.
Is the first thing to do.
Yeah.
The second thing to say with that is that PBC behaves in a particular way. Okay, so over time, PBC will always behave in a particular way. Okay, and it doesn't normally have surprises. So many people who come to the clinic to see me will be familiar with me saying is there are no surprises here. We will telegraph what's happening. So we talked about these changes in bilirubin. That's an example of it. Okay, we look for trends over a length of time. We rarely have, surprise changes. Okay, now one thing that PBC, I can tell people, never does is go from a FibroScan of 13 to 28 in a year. That's just not what PBC does. PBC changes, that's a pattern over multiple years or decades. Okay, we do not see that in a year. Okay, now if therefore somebody is going at that rate, if that's real, if the previous one was real and this one is real, with all the caveats I've given, then that is very unusual with PBC. And where we would go, so my first thing I would do with that is to check, because it doesn't quite ring true to me. If we check and it's real, then I would want to know one of two things. Is this a very aggressive variant of PBC? So is this somebody with a very inflammatory version, maybe an autoimmune hepatitis type pattern, that would be typical of the disease progressing rapidly? Okay, so autoimmune hepatitis can progress rapidly. This is somebody who's had a transplant, that can progress rapidly. And then the other one is there another form of liver disease there as well, hiding underneath the PBC, that could make it worse? And there are a couple of traps that can do that. Mm-hmm. So I would be a little bit just cautious about that. That just doesn't add up. Okay. And, the one advantage of having done PBC for 30 years is you've got quite a finely tuned way of sensing something doesn't add up.
Okay.
That is one of the situations in which I will be suggesting a liver biopsy, because I can't make that all add up. If somebody has got a value of that, then if their liver biochemistry is normal and they're functioning normal, then there's nothing to be worried about, but we need to screen for cirrhosis complications. Okay. But the biopsy in that situation is mainly to find out, is there more than one component to the liver injury, which means that our normal predictability of PBC has gone out of the window a little bit. So that's one that needs a little bit further thought.
Is there a scale available to show values of, the FibroScan? We don't have anything like that. Is there something that somebody could ping to me, perhaps?
For sure. I had it sitting on my desk a few minutes ago, and I've lost it. So Jess my colleague, came up with a standard set of values, that the ones that we operate on, right, which the French came up with. So essentially, the two magic numbers for PBC. We can write about. I mean,
ping it to me, David. I'm keen
so basically, anything below 10 is fine. You know, 4, 5, 6 is normal. Below 10 is fine. Between 10 and 18 is fibrosis, scarring developing in the liver, and above 18 is normally taken as cirrhosis. But that, remember, is for 1,000 patients, okay? And the relevance of that to any one individual is less clear, okay? So FibroScan is useful, but it's not infallible. And it's part of a picture, but you need to have the whole picture.
Right, we're going to hammer on. Can I take vitamin D tablets? I don't like taking supplements. And the answer to that.
What? D.
Vitamin D. Vitamin D.
Yes, in fact, my wife sits me down every day and says I must take vitamin D. Everyone in the UK is vitamin D deficient because the sun never shines and we all put sunblock on.
Yeah. I sometimes have what feels like electric flash down my thighs, especially my right leg. Would that be the itch?
If it's under the skin like that, yes, but if it's going shooting down, that normally indicates some form of pressure on the nerves. So that's sciatica type of thing. So the answer is probably not.
Yeah. I was recently diagnosed without biopsy, but elevated GGT and high levels of antibodies. My hep doctor started me on 1,200 milligrams an hour. So do you think that's high dose? I should have been eased into it. My weight is about 158. Well, some people are eased into it and some people aren't. You know, it's a bit, and if I would say to this person, if you're keeping well, if you've no side effects, I mean, there shouldn't be an issue.
So 150 kilos or pounds?
158 is all the put, you see. It would be,
so if it's 158 kilos, it's actually a little bit underdosed. And if it's 158 pounds, then it's probably a little bit overdosed.
Yeah, can we say to that person, look, we have this online. You can get this from the office. Have a look because your message isn't too clear.
So it slightly depends if it's whether one of our North American friends. So in North America, people talk about pounds for weight, and we talk about rather.
So do I. And inches, feet, and yards.
But of course, in Scotland, when people talk about pounds, they talk about all the extra money that gets sent up.
The stuff she's grounded, Professor Jones has spoken before about SAM-E supplement. Can I ask how much to take and all in one go or divided throughout the day? Many thanks. Same SAM-E.
Yes. So
one go divided.
Yes. S-adenosyl methionine is the only drug ever shown to improve fatigue in PBC. And everyone forgets this because it was a trial done in 1990 before people thought about this. So it's an extraordinary trial. It's 350 people, which, as you'll know, is an extraordinarily large trial. And it showed a clear improvement in fatigue. And then we forgot about it. We then went down the blind alley of does fatigue exist? And if it exists, I mean, if it's not real, how can it improve? And So there's a trial that showed it. Piotr Miklevich, who many people will have heard of in Poland, who's a very good PBC doctor, I know him very well. He has done a trial recently of S-adenosyl methionine for PBC, and it significantly improves the function test and it improves fatigue. Okay, so there is good evidence that it works for fatigue in PBC. It is a vitamin, and it is one of those supplements that it is very reasonable for people to think about taking because it's a vitamin. I mean, it's not a drug. And unusually for these things, it has trial evidence. Okay. It is not or wasn't until very recently available in the UK. I mean, literally nobody sold it. So it was not something we ever used, although I was involved in a trial in 1988. So it undoubtedly, I think, has potential, and we would love to do a trial of it in PBC. And we've been trying to persuade the people who make it to do a trial since the beginning of time, and we haven't yet succeeded. However, the advent of the internet means that it's much more straightforward to get hold of vitamins that aren't available over the counter. You know, no shop, there's no wholesaler that sells it, so your local shop can't get it. But of course, the internet can access it from elsewhere. So people are starting to take it, buying it over the internet. And I've started mentioning it to people in the clinic because it's the only treatment that's ever had a proven effect to improve fatigue, and it's available. It's available in sports shops in America because it improves exercise capacity.
Well, why is this person asking it to be divided or one dose? Surely that should be instructions with
yes. The answer is it's used in different doses in different settings. I think the vitamin dose, is 400 milligrams a day. In truth, what it does is supplement a thing called glutathione, and glutathione is another vitamin that our body needs, and it needs to be there to detoxify things. It's what the liver uses to clean your blood. And there's some old data to show that glutathione in PBC is almost completely depleted. It's unmeasurable. And so I think what S-adenosyl methionine is doing is supplementing the glutathione and returning people to their background. I don't think the dose matters, because I think people are going to be so depleted that any that they take will have an effect, because if it works the way we think it does, and I don't think it needs to be in divided doses. Like a lot of these things, they can sometimes give you a bit of sickliness with it. But it's a vitamin. It's not a licensed medicine. It's not regulated in any way. It's perfectly safe to take. You can't get it on prescription in the UK because nobody sells it here, but you can, I understand, get it off the internet.
Oh yeah, somebody's saying, what is a safe internet provider? That's not something that we would know. David, you got time for one more question?
One question.
Right, I had great results with fenofibrate.
Yeah.
Completely relieved my itching, and numbers were normal for the first time since diagnosis. That being said, in the 8 months I took it, I fell ill 6 times. Saw a neurologist. He decided it was the fenofibrate causing it, because uncle necrosis can be a side effect. Have you heard of this? Because I want to go back on it.
What sclerosis? What?
Uncle, as in relative, uncle necrosis. It's obviously a typo. I don't know what this person means.
I think, okay, so 2 things to that. So we've talked about bezafibrate. This is fenofibrate. The 2 are essentially interchangeable, and bezafibrate is just the one that people tend to use now, but fenofibrate is a slightly different version of the same thing. And that's great. So biochemistry has improved and the itch has improved, which is what we talked about, what bezafibrate does. Now, drug side effects are notoriously difficult to unpick, okay? Because there are a small number of very common ones and there is a very large number of very rare ones. And so trying to work out a particular association between a particular drug and a particular side effect is very challenging. So my favorite one is the fact that Tony Blair and the Labour government are responsible for recurrent PBC post-transplant. Okay, not a lot of people know that. And the evidence for that is that the incidence of recurrence of PBC post-transplant went right up from 1997 onwards. Okay, and that's when Tony Blair came to power. So therefore, Tony Blair causes recurrent PBC. Okay? It's a proven fact. Now, also, coincidentally, we changed immunosuppression practice in 1997. And so we moved to tacrolimus rather than cyclosporin. And James Neuberger actually showed that it's tacrolimus that's associated with increased risk of recurrence. So much as I'd like to blame Tony Blair, I actually can't. So everyone, I joke about it, but trying to pin something on a drug is very difficult. So if somebody has an event or a set of events like this, and they've only happened since the drug came along, then common sense says stop the drug, because it feels like there's an association, okay? But it could have been something else that happened over the same period of time, Tony Blair, tacrolimus. If the side effect or if the problem goes away after that, then it's more evidence that the drug caused it. Starting the drug caused the problem, stopping the drug, the problem went away. So that would kind of fit with that. But remember, in 2010, the Labour government lost power, so that could have been the same thing. So, there could be other reasons why that happens. The true way to know is to take a drug again and find out what happens. So I think if you've got a really good response, it sounds like a really good response. Mm-hmm. What I would do is do two things. I would try bezafibrate rather than fenofibrate in case it was something unique to fenofibrate. In terms of PBC, they're the same. So I would try a different variant of it. That may well do the trick. And I would start with a low dose. I would just start, 1 tablet a week and then see what happens. And I would then build it up. So I don't know. I've not seen that with fibrates. Yeah. But if it really, really came on with the drug and really, really stopped afterwards, it's possible. But I would probably I think it's very reasonable just to try the different version of it in a very low dose and see what happens. If the problem comes back, you've got your answer.
Okay, and that we're going to have to stop there. We've got a few questions left, but we'll give them. We're with Dr. Hegarty next week, so we'll give them to him. We're behind a bit because last week Bob Gaish, he got the timings wrong. They had a time change in the States and everything went skew with David. So more than normal. David, you've been fantastic. Thank you so much. Now listen, everybody, we've had a massive audience today. And thank you to everybody in the background here. And Linda, who you never see on screen. We've had a massive audience today. This is a fantastic service. Professor Jones is one of the top PBC experts in the world. I'm being nice about you in the world. And on his behalf, please donate to the foundation. My question and comments.
And I would agree. I would agree with that and echo that. And just before we go, I will be back next month. One of the things that I am thinking about, and we can think about how to do this, is there are so many good questions that one of the things I'm going to suggest is that for the next version of the book, we can allow people to have a system whereby people can send questions in that I then answer in the book. I know it wasn't a plug. I'm beyond that. I'm beyond that. But one of the things that I'm wondering, if we were to do an ever-expanding questions section, so that people could email in to the foundation a question for the book.
And it gives us a chance to get the right information, because not all the questions are packed with
and we know that most frequently asked questions are not frequently asked questions at all. They're just what somebody thought, but we could actually make it a genuine frequently asked questions section.
So somebody's saying my question and comments don't show on, but you're not saying you're missing out words here. But listen, please send in a donation. We cannot continue to run on fresh air. David, you're a star as always. Now, will we do some catching up next week so as we can, because we need to just put all stuff in our little boxes for what we're doing together. Is that okay?
Yes.
Would you want to contact me and I'll work around you?
Would you drop Miriam an email? Sorry, this has got, sorry.
Right,
this has got,
I'll drop me an email.
Just drop. What she's going to say is that my diary's a bit of a nightmare at the moment. There's a lot on, but
please
we'll find some
let
time.
me know spelling to vitamins. Right, so I won't. I'll give you a couple of weeks. I'm on holiday the following week in Northumberland. Please let me know spelling to vitamins. I don't know. Jean, you need to come in next week. I don't know what you're saying. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody in the background. Dave, have a great weekend. Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Good to see you.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Are you off?
I think so.
I'll just grab one of them out, so. Ready for it.
How do I stop this one? Why is it not working?